How important is single-player content in fighting games? On second thought, forget I even asked. I'm going to instead show you why single-player content in fighting games is absolutely essential for the long-term health of the genre and how it can make such a difference even if the core of the game is direct player versus player battles. Let me introduce you to one of the most unique and best experiences that you'll probably never ever play. Dissidia is a mix between a fighting game and an action RPG. It was released to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Final Fantasy, and to say that this game was a love letter to fans is an understatement. The version that will be covered in this video is known as Dissidia Duodecim. It is the sequel and definitive version of the Dissidia experience, as it comes packaged with the entirety of the original Dissidia game, alongside new characters, abilities, skills, equipment, story content, and some tweaks and rebalances to further enhance their experience. It was an odd but bold choice to represent one of the biggest turn-based JRPG franchises in history with a real-time fighting game, but I'm really glad that they did this because I didn't care at all about Final Fantasy as a franchise. Until this game, that is. The developers' intent were to capture the spectacle of an intense CGI anime fight like the cinematics you've witnessed in this video so far, and they nailed it masterfully with responsive controls, stylish animations, and superb game design. When I first saw the gameplay, I immediately thought that it would be kind of fun to play this game casually for a couple hours with my friends, but I wasn't aware that I was going to pour so much time into this game because at the time of release, I was really hitting my stride in getting into competitive games like Street Fighter 4. Flashiness would only keep my attention for so long, but I was surprised and hooked by the level of depth that Dissidia's combat system would provide. At its core, Dissidia's gameplay is about two characters duking it out in a 3D arena. The developers at Square Enix could have made something more traditional like Dragon Ball FighterZ or Injustice 2. They could have even phoned it in and gave us a mediocre beat-em-up like Dragon Ball Sagas. But no. Instead, they spent the better half of 2 years developing and fine-tuning Dissidia's combat system to properly capture the intense and high-octane action that they had envisioned. Combat in Dissidia revolves around 4 main actions. Dodging, which you can do in midair or on the ground and provides invincibility frames. Blocking, which lets you counter certain attacks and stagger opponents. And the last 2 actions are unique to Dissidia itself. Bravery attacks and HP attacks. Bravery attacks have faster startup, can be blocked, and deal no direct damage to an enemy. Instead, it impacts the player's bravery points, represented by the bigger number above a player's life bar. The bravery bar builds up more points for the players dishing out the damage, while subtracting points from the players getting hit. These bravery points can be expended by the use of HP attacks, slower moves that are unblockable, and they usually come in the form of each character's iconic moves from their individual games. When an HP attack connects, all of the player's bravery points are converted into direct damage and is subtracted from the opposing player's life pool. When you expend your bravery points, your points go to 0 for a time. If someone is hit with a bravery attack when their bravery points are at 0, they will be put in a break state. The player who breaks the other players get a large bonus of bravery points from the stage's bravery pool, potentially giving them enough brute force to end the match with one single attack. While in break state, the broken player have a higher chance to be dealt critical hits from attacks, can do no brave damage to the enemy, and they will do no damage when they land an HP attack. But by landing an HP attack, they will be taken out of the break state, or they can just wait a while, and if they don't get hit, they'll go back to normal. This is the general core gameplay loop of Dissidia. Build up your bravery points while denying your opponents as many brave points as possible. Block speed, brave attacks, HP attack speed, blocks, and brave attacks generally beat out HP attacks in terms of speed. Some HP attacks have armor or block properties, so be warned. Fights can be frantic, nuanced, and strategic. There are 2 deeper combat systems within Dissidia Duodecim, one being the EX mode and EX meter, and the other being the assist gauge, which allows you to call on other characters within the game to help extend your combos, do HP attacks, or can be used as a substitution no jutsu to get out of a sticky situation. There are other systems at play, but I will not cover them in this video. What I wanted to highlight was how much effort the developers went into making a unique combat system to achieve their vision and pretty much do the impossible. The majority of Final Fantasy titles are single-player experiences that are usually turn-based, While there has been a shift in becoming an action RPG at the time of Dissidia and Duodecim's release, this was not the case. It would be fair then to assume that the audience they were targeting are RPG fans and not fighting game fans. How then does Dissidia represent these systems without intimidating and scaring away too many players? Character progression is a very important concept within role-playing games. Most turn-based strategy games are not execution reliant, but instead utilizes statistical advantage to determine success or failure. Elements like character levels, stats, and equipment are key factors in balancing the combat of a role-playing game. Tacking on any or all of these elements into a traditional fighting game like Street Fighter or Tekken will usually end up in an unbalanced, uncompetitive, and unfun mess. Now, I'm not saying Dissidia Duodecim is balanced. Far from it. It is fundamentally a broken game.
Oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
But for the playtime of most players, they probably didn't even notice. By designing a combat system that accounts for stat parameters, customizable abilities, character progression, and varied equipment, the developers were able to maintain the fun throughout a player's moment-to-moment gameplay, without feeling too unfair for most of Dissidia's single-player runtime and even in multiplayer versus mode as well. There are for sure some nutty broken builds in Dissidia, but in Dissidia Duodecim you can change the rule set to disallow the stat parameters from affecting a game, or turning off mechanics that are more luck based, or may be deemed a bit unfair. There is a ton of stage variety. Some of them are a bit more chaotic and may even be hazardous. Some of them are way too cramped to the point where it pulls the camera in a way where you can't even see the enemy or what's going on, and some of them are perfect. The combat system is robust enough where with minor tweaking this could be a competitively viable game.
Ready?
The developers intentionally chose to focus on the fun of the game rather than focus on competitive fairness, even though they did try to maintain some semblance of balance, but it was the absolute right call to make. Most players who did pick up Dissidia were probably not fighting game fans. Instead, they were probably drawn in by their favorite characters, the flashiness of the action, or perhaps the unique systems that Dissidia provides. I would also wager that many players who did pick up Dissidia probably spent dozens of hours without ever playing versus a real opponent, which is not a bad thing as there is a ton of single player content to go through within Dissidia Duodecim. Before I continue, question for you all: did you know that Dissidia Duodecim was a thing before this video? Also, would you like to play it on a modern console with robust netcode? Let me know in the comments below, and if you've been having a good time so far, support this video by giving it a like and consider subscribing for more content like this. Thanks. Dissidia Duodecim contains a story mode spanning anywhere from 200 to 80 hours depending on how much you want to clear. The general story premise is serviceable, with two warring gods stuck in a perpetual cycle of conflict against one another. The goddess of harmony and the god of discord fight each other through their avatars, the Final Fantasy heroes and villains, until one completely dominates the other. Then the world resets, everyone forgets their memories, and the fighting begins again. In the Duodecim storyline, the story covers the 12th cycle, and some of the characters start to remember and attempt to break this never-ending cycle. The original Dissidia story, which is also included in Duodecim, covered the 13th and supposedly final cycle. There is a post-game epilogue scenario that essentially acts as the endgame. The character interactions between the playable cast members are generally well written.
And here I thought you were just another prepubescent pretty boy.
And since they all have amnesia, they go through a condensed character arc similar to their original game. The dialogue has many callback and references to their original title, a fun treat for any fan of the series.
Look what happens when I don't hold back. You're still just a kid. You've got limitless potential running through your veins. You'll be up on your feet by tomorrow.
Where are you going? This isn't over yet. There's no tomorrow for me. Unless I beat you today!
Pesky little runt. Who do you take after?
Go ask yourself!
It was good enough to get me interested in the Final Fantasy lore and has made me a fan of the franchise. Each main story scenario has you exploring an eerily barren world map as a callback to the overworlds of older Final Fantasy titles, but it being barren is a good thing as it helps to service the atmosphere of the story. You can talk to NPC Moogles, buy items from certain vendors, and fight enemies on the overworld or within dungeons, which puts you on a mini-game chessboard where proper maneuvering and chaining together of battles will give you bonus points to buy better equipment or even to unlock treasures within the chessboard itself. Speaking of equipment, when you first boot up the game, every character in your arsenal starts up at level 1 with no equipment. Regardless of the mode that you play in, as soon as you deal damage, you get experience points, which helps you level up your character. By defeating certain enemies or breaking things in the stage, you can get materials to trade in and craft equipment and accessories. As you level up, your characters start unlocking more brave attacks, HP attacks, movement abilities, and passive abilities. You can pretty much equip whatever you want up to the limit of 450 CP. Each attack and ability has an initial cost, and once you master the ability, you'll be able to reduce that cost so you can equip more. Slowly handing out attacks and abilities also doubles as a nice learning curve. Many fighting game fans, myself included, love to be handed all the tools at the start. This works great for a competitive setting, but can really hinder someone who's trying to get into the game, as there's so much to learn and master. It can be hard to really pinpoint what to focus on, and this is where an RPG progression system really helps out. The players are given new tools periodically and are encouraged to level up their proficiency so they can reduce the cost of said skill or tool. This gets them to interact with said system and to interact with the single player content while maintaining engagement in the combat systems and the micromanaging within the menus. By pairing up abilities with equipment passives and accessory passives, you can make unique builds that focus on different aspects of the battle system, which I think is really freaking cool. This means that most players who play a certain character will probably play them a little bit differently or a lot differently, and I like seeing that kind of stuff. It's not balanced, right? If you were to add this to an actual fighting game, ooh, it'd be a big mess. But for Dissidia Duodecim, a single player focused fighting game, it absolutely freaking works. Each playable character has a character gimmick and a unique playstyle, and the story mode forces you to play some of these characters. Some character gimmicks, like being able to block literally any attack and counter, is a lot better than others, and that is the price that Dissidia Duodecim pays to give each character that unique flavor. And it's a pretty clear sign that the developers were focused on the fun aspects more so than the balance aspect. An abundance of unique playstyles equates to more replayability, and that replay value increases with more build diversity. There are probably many people who enjoy and love Dissidia and know a lot about the battle mechanics of Dissidia Duodecim, but don't have any interest in PvP or playing a fighting game. And ultimately, that's a good thing. The most difficult part of a traditional fighting game is not the execution, but more so the understanding of system mechanics within the game itself. And if developers can generate single player content that sparks the interest for players to learn these mechanics, that is a success. Looking back at it, the developers were a bit ahead of their time as well, as they also made a roguelike survival mode called Labyrinth mode, where you essentially pick a character and start out butt naked, no equipment, no accessories, no anything. And each section of the labyrinth is a deck of cards where you draw 3 cards, and you basically pick an enemy to fight to earn money, equipment to buy, pick up bonuses from the job cards, or even recruit allies to be assist characters or other playable characters within your party of 5. Apparently, I've only unlocked close to 30% of the entire labyrinth, and I have almost 300 hours played on this save file. Dissidia Duodecim is the perfect case study for genre blends. Instead of tacking on every little thing from both genres, the developers chose elements from fighting games and RPGs that help to convey their vision and intent. The average player was incentivized to dig deeper into the battle systems of Dissidia due to the overwhelming amount of single player content, and I do wonder how many role-playing game fans became interested in fighting games thanks to Dissidia. And that is why single player content is important for fighting games, because it is that pathway for players to learn the systems of the game at their own pace without feeling the pressure of having to compete with others. And in that aspect, Dissidia Duodecim accomplished its goals masterfully. The game itself is far from perfect, but it shines brightly where it truly mattered. Now that we got to see a fighting game that successfully blended in RPG progression mechanics into its systems, what about some role-playing games that tried to implement fighting game systems to enhance its gameplay? Did it work? Or better yet, can it even work? Find out in this video on screen right now, and thank you for watching.